Class today we're doing the portion of Chia Sara, the life of Sarah. We are going to the class starts on page. Anyone know the page in your book? The class starts on page 50. Page 50. 51. No? Yeah. 51. Class starts on page 51 in the book. And it's truly a fascinating class. It's a fascinating parsha. It's really a fascinating parsha. So the Rebbe talks about this week's portion talks about Chia Sara this week, the life of Sarah. Now we have a fascinating Rashi in this week's portion that says that the rabbis tell us Yafa sichasin shel avdei aves. If you listen to the Rashi says that the Eibishter loves, seemingly, God loves the stories of the servants of the patriarchs and matriarchs, even than the laws of the children. Because the Torah gives us so much space to the stories, even this week's portion, the story of Eliezer, the son of the servant of Abraham, and we learn laws from the extra letter. And over here it gives stories and stories. The stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We've gone through a portion of Lech Lecha, Vayera, Chia Sara, Toldos, Vayetze, we go on and on, these stories of the patriarchs. These stories must have an important thing to each and every one of us. These stories have to be our stories. Right. If not, then it's a boring story. Then why are we doing this year after year? It doesn't make sense if it's just telling us some kind of story that happened to somebody else. My friends, the Torah wants that each and every one of us should find ourselves in the story. To find ourselves in their story. And then the Torah comes alive. And that's our obligation by learning the Torah and by connecting to Sarah to make it alive. And the Rebbe says that that's the important name that we give to this week's portion. To tell us that the stories of the Torah is not about stories that happened years ago, because that would just be a history book, and the Torah is not a history book. You want to go to the history, there's a lot of great books. Gemara will give you history, Medrash will give you history. Books have been written on Jewish history. The Torah is not a history book. The Torah is a living book. Torah's Chaim, it's called, the book of life, and therefore the Torah needs to be alive today, needs to have some relevance to each and every person's life, and therefore it's important to learn the Torah and find it and to make it alive. And how do we make that concept alive, really? So let's start off with the text number 1 of the Rebbe. It's a beautiful sikh of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says as follows: the reality that for easily 1,000 years or more, Jewish people have been accustomed to calling the portion by these names, right? Every portion has a name. There's no, you don't see in the Torah, if you open up a scroll, you don't see the names of the portion. There's not like the name of the portion in front of every portion. We've given names to the portion. This week it's called Chia Sara, the life of Sarah. That's the name of the portion. Last week was the portion of Vayera. Previous week, the portion of Lech Lecha. And that's how we call the portion. That's what we call the week. When the person asks, what week are we in? We're in the portion of Chia Sara. That's what you should be in. What week are we in? We're in the week of Chia Sara. That's the week we're in. What else? How else would you say? This is the week of Chia Sara. We live with it, right? I mentioned Moshe Rabbeinu wanted that Jews should read the portion. He made sure that you shouldn't be 3 days without the portion. So you read the portion on Monday, read the portion on Thursday, and then we read the entire portion on Shabbos. So this is the portion of Chia Sara. This is the light. This is the portion, the name. So I don't know, but I tried to Google it. When did these names come up? Really? When did these names? Who established these names? But it doesn't make a difference. That's a separate issue. Who established the name? But ultimately, for thousands of years, this was the name of the portion. Everybody called it by the name Chia Sara. is so much as the Torah portion has been established with these names for hundreds and hundreds of years. And especially since they have been called as such by great sages and teachers of Israel, that's nothing new. So therefore you see throughout all the commentators, they wrote their commentary on the portion of Chia Sara. All this week's commentaries have been written on the portion of Chia Sara. These are undoubtedly the names according to the Torah. If that was established, then that's the name of the portion. So the portion is called Chia Sara, the life of Sarah. Even though the portion, really Sarah, is only the first couple of verses in the beginning of the portion. Right? And Sarah lived 127 years and she died. That completes the portion. That completes about Sarah. Really, the last week's portion should be called Chia Sara. If we really want to talk about the life of Sarah, it was last week. We don't call last week's portion Chia Sara. We call this week's portion Chia Sara, even though seemingly the whole concept of Sarah ends in a couple of verses. It's really the major stories of this week's portion is going to be in text number 2, 3, and 4. So I'm not going to read the texts because it'll be taking me too long. Text number 2, the Torah talks about how Abraham bought a burial plot for Sarah. She's passed away. How Abraham bought a burial plot for Sarah. And where he bought this burial plot. And it cost him a lot of money to buy this burial plot for Sarah. So it's really going back to Abraham. The next major part of the portion is the story of Isaac. This is where I mentioned in the beginning that the Torah talks a lot about the story of the servants of the patriarchs, where Abraham asked Eliezer, his servant, to go out and get a shidduch for his son, right? So it's a whole story, a ganze Maisa, how Abraham ultimately meets Eliezer meets his girl Rivka, and so that's the next major story, and they get married, Baruch Hashem. And the last story, on text number 4, the text number 4, which is at the end of the portion, we have Abraham remarries. Right? Abraham remarries, and he has 6 children. He remarries Hagar. According to many, he remarries his previous Hagar, the one who he married before, Hajjishmal. He remarries her. Actually, today in the Chitas, Torah tells that even Isaac goes back to bring back Hagar, bring back his mother's maidservant to bring her back to Abraham. They marry, and they have 6 children. And then the Torah says Abraham gives all his possessions to Isaac. He sends off the other children. He gives them gifts. He sends them off. And Abraham passes away in this week's parasha at the end of the portion. And now next week we start the story of Isaac. So, what does all these stories have to do with the life of Sarah? This is like sounding like the opposite of the life of Sarah. Abraham goes on. Life should be that way. Abraham goes on in life. He was married for many years with this woman, and he loved her, self-understood. She passes tragically, suddenly, right? She passes suddenly, and he goes on in life. Actually, he takes care of his son to make a shidduch. First, he takes care to bury her, and then he takes care to his son, and then he remarries, and then he passes on. So it's really going back to Abraham, not to Sarah. How do we call this week's portion Chia Sara, the life of Sarah? That's the Lubavitcher Rebbe's question. Okay. And the Rebbe is going to say that. So what does it do with us? That's really the question. What does it do with what was nice? I'm not here to give you a nice lecture. I'm here that we walk away with something from this story. Actually, if you look in the Torah, and emphasizing even more, if you look in the Parsha says that after Yitzchak is brought to his beautiful wife, Rebecca, is brought to her in text number 5. This is in Bereshit 24, verse 67. And Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. He took Rebecca, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted to the loss of the mother. He was comforted. Why was he comforted for the loss of his mother? What was missing? Child, only child. But Rashi says, to the tent of his mother, he brought her to the tent of, and behold, this is actually Tres Chitas, and she was Sarah, she was Sarah, his mother. Meaning, she became like Sarah, his mother. For as long as Sarah was alive, a candle burnt from one Shabbos to the eve to the next Shabbos. A blessing was found in the dough, and a cloud was attached to the tent. When she died, these things ceased. When Rebecca arrived, they resumed. So, here we have a sense that Isaac is finding himself, he's missing something is lost. Something has disappeared from their lives, right? They're missing this woman in their life. There was missing a woman in their life. Sarah missing their mother. Till they brought another woman in their life. They brought Rivka in their life, which brought them back to the beauty of Sarah. Because whatever Sarah brought to the tent, Rebecca brought back to the tent. So, the question that the Rebbe asked is, in text number 7 is the question. The name of the parsha is puzzling. The entire portion speaks of events that did not occur in Chia Sara during her lifetime. On the contrary, every occurrence in the portion happened after Sarah's death. And not only did it happen in a time following her passing, in the context of every event represents the opposite of Sarah's life. Right?
What's the opposite?
Because everything was missing in essence. It was all missing. Right? We have to have Rebecca to come and bring back something that was missing. So something is missing. So she is missing. So how do we call it the concept of Sarah? How do we call it the life of Sarah when she's missing? When we have to wait to Rebecca to come to bring back Sarah, some aspect of Sarah in the existence of Isaac and Abraham. So what is missing? What is truly missing? What was missing? She passed away, but what was truly missing in their lives? What was missing in their life? What did she bring to life? The truth is, the Torah in essence, chicken soup. But yeah, I heard it. I'm very good at it. Well, it was a blessing in the dough. It was a blessing in the dough. There was a blessing in the dough, so they were missing chicken soup. But so the question is, if the portion doesn't deal with Sarah's life, why do we call the portion the life of Sarah? What? What was a spirit? What was the spirit in the portion? What is the spirit in the portion that actually tells us that behind the scenes she is still alive? That's really the question. What is this? Because we cannot say that Sarah is dead, because the portion is called Chia Sara, that she is alive. So what is the portion telling us something which seemingly, if you read the portion, seemingly Abraham has moved on in life, and he's buried her, and he's gone on to find Isaac a wife, and he's ultimately remarried, and ultimately Isaac finds another wife, Baruch Hashem, another mother, so to say. Rashi says, in essence, he finds another mother because he finds this woman that he feels like it's his mother. And Isaac goes on too. So why would we call the portion Chia Sara when seemingly everything has moved on, which everything should move on in life, but there must be something that Sarah is doing behind the scenes, because if not, we wouldn't have called the parsha Chia Sara.
Is that like
We actually would call it Chaya Avram, maybe.
tradition like
Right? Okay, we'll soon see.
Wasn't Sarah's death because she heard of the occasion?
Right.
So she was shocked or
Right. I said she had a sudden.
back
She had a sudden
by
death.
the action of her husband?
She had a sudden death. Yeah. True. She had a sudden death. Correct.
nothing to do
But that has nothing to do with the issue. The point is that Sarah died, and that's 3 verses or 4 verses in the pasuk, and that's ended. Actually, 2 verses in the beginning of the pasuk. She lived 127 years. She passed away. Tragically, she passed away.
But her life didn't stop.
So what did her life didn't stop? It's nice. It's a nice expression, like you say. Her life, her spirituality didn't stop. What are that? It's nice words. I need to know what it is. What didn't stop? Something didn't stop. That means, my friend, that Chia Sara, her life didn't stop then. Her life still doesn't stop. Right. What did Sarah bring to the table that the portion is called the life of Sarah? Sarah must have brought something to the table that we still call the portion today, Chia Sara. The life of Sarah.
reincarnation.
What?
Nothing to do with
No.
Lord Isaac.
I don't know who the reincarnation is. Who's the reincarnation today of Sarah? I don't know. So I don't know who the reincarnation is. She brought laughter. She was the only one who brought laughter to the world.
But she was the mother of Yitzhak.
Okay.
Is that not enough? I mean,
Phenomenal.
not enough.
Unbelievable.
She gave life to-
What does it do with Avram? She must have brought something to the table that we continue to call this portion the life of Sarah. Because if not, if she didn't bring something to the table, if she didn't change something in the world of Abraham, then her life would not be called the life of Sarah. So we really need to understand, the Rebbe says, not that she was a woman and she made good challah and she had wonderful chicken soup, and like we praise a lot of people, and like when you go to funerals, oh, she was the best cook, and she was a wonderful person, and she was a wonderful wife, and she was... Life goes on. Life goes on. Life goes on. And that's what happened to Abraham. Life did go on. Baruch Hashem. He didn't, even though maybe Hagar's chicken soup was not as good as Sarah's chicken soup, but he remarried, he had 6 more children, and life went on. And that's the way it should be. But still it's called Chia Sara. It's still called the life of Sarah. So you can imagine, how does life go on, and we still call it the life of Sarah? And then we have to ask yourself, what did Sarah bring to the table? So really, the Rebbe is going to go into a very interesting concept, and he's going to try to contrast the life of Sarah and the life of Abraham. What did Abraham bring to the table? We all know what Abraham brought to the table. What did Sarah bring to the table in contrast to Abraham? What I mean when I bring to the table, I mean bring to the world. Okay? What did Abraham bring to the world? And what did Sarah bring to the world? Okay, let's see. So therefore the Rebbe says as follows. Look in text number 8. Okay, let's roll. You'll see everything in the Sikha. The Rebbe says, the Rebbe writes, the truth is, true life must be a lasting eternal life. You have to get first of principle. When you say life is everlasting. Most of us say nothing is everlasting. Even our life is not everlasting. Whether we have 120 years inflation, you have 180 years in Mitzvah Hashem. But, you know what I mean? Life life ultimately comes to an end. Everything comes to an end. So that's not real life. Life that comes to an end is not a real life. When you say something has life, it has to be an everlasting situation. That's why by us we say we have a neshama, which is an everlasting life. So the body might come to an end, but the neshama continues, because life needs to continue. But the truth is, my friends, life doesn't only mean in your neshama, that your neshama continues. Life needs to continue in this world. Your neshama came down to bring life to this world. Your neshama was alive before it came down to the world. Your neshama comes down to this world. Your soul comes down to this world to bring life to this world. So then life needs to continue in this world. If not, then it's not real life. It's not the concept of life. There's something missing in the life of that person if it comes to an end. This is a general important point. And that's why we call God the concept of life. We call Torah the concept of life. Because it's everlasting. Because that's true life. And the Eibishter wanted that a human being should also live a true life. A life that's everlasting. Yeah, sure.
The neshama isn't the spirit.
Yeah. But I don't need that. The spirit was alive before the neshama came down to the world. So I that's not a chachma that the neshama is everlasting and life of everlasting. We need to have the neshama came down to me in this body. The neshama wants to be everlasting here. That's why we say on the bottom, Tehei nafshe tzura b'tzera chaim. May his life be bond with the bond of life. And there's many interpretations to that statement. May his life be bond with the bond. Because and many interpret it that he shouldn't be forgotten in this world. Right? He lived the world 100 years, 120 years. Hasta la vista. We'll see you another time. No. May his soul be bond with the bond of life, with the living. May his soul have an effect on the world of the living.
That's a big thing.
Right?
We don't think about it when we say it.
But that's, no, because you can also translate his bond with the world with God who is living.
Very nice.
But the truth is, I don't need to say may his soul be bound with God. His soul is bound with God. What that's may his soul, we may his soul. His soul is a part of God. So what do you mean? May his soul be bound with the bond of life. May his soul be bound with the bond of life. May he not be forgotten here. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't want to forget him here. How do you not forget a person here?
His deeds.
He has to do something really special. You know, not making chicken soup is going to make his deed not forgotten. He has to do something really unbelievable in the world. He has to come up with chicken soup to begin with, okay? So how do we do something in the world that it will never be forgotten? Never ever be forgotten. And Chassidus says the only way you can do that, Torah says the only way you can do that, is if you connect your life with God. Because when you connect your physical life with God, that means you live your purpose. You live a true purpose life, then your life cannot be forgotten. So we need to find a purpose in life. You have to have an agenda. And that's the beauty of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, is they had an agenda. They didn't come down to the world to live and to be here. They had an agenda. And that agenda, we know Abraham's agenda from the day, everybody knows Abraham's agenda. The question is, what was Sarah's agenda? She had to have an agenda. And we know her agenda. We'll say it in a couple minutes. And it was not just, the tent, that her bread was delicious and the candles were burning from Friday to Friday, which is unbelievable. But really, those things, her miracles that happened with her, is because she had an agenda. And ultimately, we're not eating Sarah's chalas, and we don't see her candles today. So what is her agenda that is affecting our lives today? That should be affecting our lives today. And in truth is, the Gemara has an interesting expression. The Gemara says that every Jew should say, when can I reach up to be like Abraham and Sarah. And what does that mean? I mean, we don't live in tents. We don't live their life. Really, the meaning of the Gemara is, when can I have an agenda in life? When can I have an agenda? What is my agenda in life? What did I come? What's my purpose here? You know, what's my purpose here? I had children. They went in their own lives. They have their own lives. Baruch Hashem, they should have their own lives. What, we should live through our children? And our children should live through us? No. We want them to be independent. They should live their lives and be successful and give us nachas. Right? That's what we want. We want them to live through us? No. We have our own agenda. They should have their own agenda. Right? So what's the agenda? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If you really want to have Chia Sara, if you want to have the life of Sarah, you want to be alive, what's your purpose? What's your agenda in this world? And once you have an agenda, you have a platform, then everything you do in life will be established on that platform. Should be established on that platform. The same can be said in the life of Sarah. When is the life of Sarah most fully revealed and validated? When the impact of the years of the life of Sarah is evident, also after the time in this world. That's really her agenda. Has not gone away, right? Her agenda, what she brought to the world, should be felt until today, as Abraham's agenda should be felt until today. Actually, the Gemara says that Sarah was a greater prophetess than Abraham was. She was greater than him. Right? Even the Torah says, whatever Sarah tells you, you shall do. So she was greater than him. So, if you know what Abraham's agenda was, you should know what Sarah's agenda was. It is precisely then that her 120 years can be referred to as the life of Sarah, as a life worthy of his name, the true life of our mother Sarah. So, what's the agenda? So, let's go to Abraham. What was the Abraham's agenda in the world? We all know monotheism, bringing God to the world. Abraham was the guy who changed the world. He became like a rock star. It says, it's mamash. It says when Abraham, I think one of the rabbis mentioned last night, it's a Medrash. The Medrash said when Abraham died, everybody knew him. Everybody knew Abraham. And trust me, in those days, for everybody to know Abraham, I mean, the guy had to be, you know, there was no WhatsApp, there was no FaceTime, there was no Facebook. You know, he made an impact in the world, and God says that Abraham, you will be, nations will bless in you. Right? That was everybody wants to be part of the Abrahamic world. Everybody wants to connect. All big religions want to connect to Abraham. Everybody wants to have a piece of Abraham. Why? Because he was like universal. Abraham was universal. He was universalism. He didn't his purpose was not to have seclusion. His was a message to everybody. The good, the bad, the pagans, those who believed, those who didn't believe, he didn't care. Because he was into that concept of bringing God to the world, everybody. Let's not seclude anybody. Let's welcome into our house everybody. Even not such good people. We're going to welcome everybody. And that was his agenda. And that's an amazing agenda. That's truly an amazing agenda that he had in the world. And right, so that's why even in the world that we're trying to bring nations together, we call it the Abrahamic Accords, right? Because let's get together. Kumbaya. Let's better get together. Let's all get together. And it's true. We should all get together. And that was Avraham Avinu. That was his life. That was his agenda. That was his purpose. And that's why in Chassidus, he's symbolic for chesed, because kindness has no limitations. You don't say, I'm kind to this person, I'm not kind to that. I'm only kind to the Jewish nation, I'm not kind to another nation. No, the kind to Abraham is kind to everybody. God gave the world to everybody. Right? Like, you say, you heard an expression, how can there be anti-racism when we're all part of the human race? We're all part of the human race. How are you racist against your own race? We're all humans. That's the truth. We are all human beings. So we're all part of the human race. So finish. So how you hate somebody that you're part of that race? You don't like tomatoes. I can understand. It's tomatoes. But how can you not hate somebody that you're another human being? You're part of the same race. And that was Avraham Avinu. We're all part of the human race. And everybody has one God. And stop it with all this narishkeit. And let's all get together, everybody on their own level, and let's all be united. And that was the beauty of Abraham. That's where you see, when God changes his name, he says, of course that was his agenda. We know that God changes his name he changes his name to the agenda of who he was. And that's in text number 8b. And your name shall no longer be Abraham, but Abraham, for it means a father of multitude of nations. You have the capability to bring together nations. And Rashi says, right over there on that pasuk, the father of a multitude of nations, verse text number 8c, Av Hamoin is an characteristic of the name. I don't know, I can do it in the Trikin. Shal Shemai is the essence of his name. Av Reish Haim. So you have Av is a father, Reish that's in his name originally, denotes the father of Aram. That's the Reish, Av Reish, because he came from Aram Narayim, which is his native place. Where now his name is Avraham. He became a father of the whole world. So you went from a father of one city, Aram Narayim. You came from Aram Narayim, a small little city or whatever, and now you became the father of the world. Why? Because you are the father of the world. You united the world. You tried to unite the world. You try to make it a unified purpose. I mean, who did that since Abraham? To bring the world together under one banner. That's what Mashiach's going to do. To bring the world together under one banner. That's how we end the blessing, Magen Avram, the shield of Abraham. Abraham was a shield for everybody. Universal. And that's why he says, and he planted an Eshel in Be'er Sheva. He planted this Eshel, which means a tree, or it means an inn. And he called there in the name of God, the God of the world. So Rashi says he called there in the name of, and the Gemara says, in Rashi brings this down. He called there in the name of the Lord, the everlasting of the world. Like Shlaka said, read not he called, but he made to call. Thereby teaching that our father Abraham caused the name of the Holy One, blessed be, to be uttered by the mouth of every passerby. Everybody suddenly started to say Baruch Hashem. That's it. Everybody. He taught people. Doesn't make a difference how religious you are, how much you believe, how much you don't believe. Say the name of God. Stop. Just say thank you, God. Start talking in the name of God. Start bringing God, the word God, to your world. So that's Abraham. What was Sarah? What was her agenda? We know Abraham's agenda. So let's look at a beautiful Gemara. The Gemara says the following story. It's a medrash. The Gemara says that Rabbi Ban'ah used to mark out caves where there were dead bodies. He would go around and he would tell people where certain great people were buried, because you have to realize that Babylonians destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, and they destroyed everything in Israel. Ultimately, the Romans did the same thing. And we see by the nations of the world, for some reason, we see that by the Germans, Yamach Shemam, and the communists, they like to destroy everything, like to erase everything, right? Even the grave site. So they destroy graves. They destroy, cemeteries. That's in the first thing they do when they come to a place. They destroy. Why? Because they don't want any existence to be remembered. Like Jews never lived here for some reason. It's in their psyche, right? They want to basically eradicate Jews, not physically but spiritually, and make believe that Jews are never here. So the Arizal also did the same thing when he came to Israel, 1,000 years ago. Again, the whole place was empty. It was like a field. And 1,000 years ago, Arizal came to Israel. I believe something like that.
It was that long?
Yeah.
Less.
Yeah, it was less.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like
Yeah.
400
400, all right. Maybe, no, I'm not sure.
something like that.
Okay, whatever.
Much less.
Much less, I'm sorry. Whatever, I'm not good in history. And he came to Israel. And you can look it up. You can Wikipedia it. And he came to Israel. You can do it right now, and you can tell me. And he came to Israel, and there was also empty. Everything was destroyed. And it was destroyed for many, many years, from the Roman times. And he came, and he started to point out everywhere people are buried. Right? So when you go to Israel and you visit these graves of great people, it's really the Arizal who says where they're buried, right? Because he knew souls. He had a soul connection. So he would tell you where, besides like the known graves. So this Rabbi Ban had the same kind of he went around Israel telling Jews. Now he did it also for practical reasons, because Kohanim are not allowed to walk on graves. So he would say, oh, this area is a cemetery. So now they would put a fence around it and say, Kohanim cannot walk. So even though it looked like a field, like you go today in Poland sometimes, there's a cemetery suddenly. It doesn't look like a cemetery. I went to Chemelnik, where my parents lived, where the cemetery is empty. It's like a field. There's not even one matzeva. There's not one monument in the cemetery. It's totally gone, right? So you just see a field, and they surrounded it by fence because this was the cemetery. I don't know, somebody must have known that this was a cemetery, right? So they have a plaque, this was a Jewish cemetery. You walk in the Jewish cemetery, you don't see one monument, you don't see nothing, it's a field. So my grandparents are buried there, but I don't know where they're buried, there's a field. Why? Because they push it, they took it all away. They used to use it for the road, whatever. Crazy situation. It was crazy. So he went around. So imagine today, you don't know, you can go to Poland, you don't, even those great-grandparents are buried someplace, you don't know where they're buried, because there's no monument for them. And that's why this organization today goes around, refixes, cemeteries in Poland and in Russia, etc., to reclaim, places where Jews were buried. So this was a problem by Jews throughout history. As you see all the way in the Gemara, this was a Tana. So,
by Isaac Luria, right?
Yeah, lived
1534 to 1560.
Okay, so 1500. I'm sorry. So it's like 500 years ago. What's different to me? 500, 1,000. It's all the same. But okay. But
A lot of our tradition is very timeless.
right. I agree with you.
It's not important almost.
It is important to us because we want to connect to it because it's important to us, and therefore, again, it's important. Imagine you go to Israel today, you wouldn't know where the Arizal or where all these tzaddikim are buried. You wouldn't have no idea if you wouldn't have somebody who would point out.
Right.
The Arizal said in Tzfas is buried double Yotze Mitzrayim. It's buried over 2 times the amount of people that went to the Mitzrayim. That means there's about 1.2 million Jews buried in Tzfas. Where are they buried in that mountain? I don't know, but he said that's what he said. So all these grave sites that you go in Tzfas or throughout Israel, like where the patriarchs of Hebron, we know where they're buried. But where all these Tanoim, he pointed it out. He said, here's buried this rabbi, here's buried this. So he did that. So he did it, and the Gemara says when he came to the cave of Abraham, this is an amazing story. So he found Eliezer, the servant agent, standing at the entrance. He meets Eliezer. He's walking around. Eliezer's walking around. He says to him, where's Abraham? I want to say hello to Abraham. So he says, Abraham is sleeping. He's taking his nap. And Sarah is gazing at his head. So he said, go tell him that Ben Aho is standing at the entrance. So Abraham said to him, let him in. And he went and he surveyed the cave. He met Abraham and Sarah and Eliezer. It's all, whatever. And he left. We're talking about a couple of thousand years after they died. But the Gemara continues. You see, over there, it's explained that it says Sarah was gazing on his head, and she was combing his hair. She was combing him. She was so whatever. That's the story in the Medrash. That's the story. You can go look it up. It's a beautiful Medrash. We know that there were many later on generations that people wanted to go into try to go and find the actual burial place of Sarah. Even the Israeli in the beginning, they wanted, and they can never ever, for some reason, can never ever find the actual how to get into even find the entrance of this cave. It's just impossible to find. Whatever. So here the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitch Rebbe, explains, says the Gemara, this rabbi really wants to tell you what was Sarah. Now, what would it mean that she was gazing at his head? What's the difference? She was gazing at it she was gazing at his head. What does that mean? And she was combing his hair. So the Tzemach Tzedek, the Lubavitch Rebbe, says over here, the rabbis really want to tell you what was the purpose of Sarah. Sarah, Abraham was more universal. If you understand the life of Sarah, she was more the opposite of universal. She was more family, more. Let's take this a little bit inner. I mean, let's bring it home. She was more homely. Sarah was in the tent. Sarah challenges Hagar, right? Sarah ultimately sends away Hagar and Yishmael, right? She says, no. I know you love everybody, but you know what? We need to put some boundaries over here. We need to protect the home. We need to protect our home, right? So I don't want Yishmael to inherit, even though he's your son. I don't want him to inherit with Isaac. I don't want that universal. I'm not interested in the universal message. That might be your agenda. My agenda is the home message.
So there's a big what if. So why did that happen? I know Hashem told him to listen to Sarah.
Right.
Follow what your wife
Correct.
says. But if it hadn't happened, the Muslim world would not exist.
Whatever.
And we'd have
That's
no
another
peace in the
question.
world.
Well, because Abraham's agenda continues. Abraham's agenda continues. Because ultimately, we're going to come to peace in the world. Because Abraham's agenda is not to run away from challenges, but to make a universal.
Okay.
I'm not arguing. I'm not telling you that Abraham or Sarah, what's more important. The Rebbe is trying to tell you that you have two agendas in this world. You have Abraham's agenda, which continues today and needs to continue. We need to be universal. As I said, we're all humanity. And ultimately, the Jews need to be a light to the world. And they need to bring ultimately rectification, not only to themselves, but to the world. But really, you need to also have Sarah. You need maybe to protect yourself first. Mm-hmm. You need to have the homebody first to be able to ultimately be a light unto the world. So Sarah, so that's why the Tzemach Tzedek, he says Sarah would separate those hairs so that he could be able to, as it were, without any spiritual impurities getting mixed up in them. So Sarah, in essence, rectified Abraham. That's why Sarah, not rectified Abraham, but Sarah tried to refine Abraham, or better, to make him a better universal person, that he would, that not everybody would per se gain from this. Only certain, or his message would be confined a little bit. So she defined his message. She defined it a little better. She tuned it. She tried to tune it. Surely, concerning her home base, she confined it. This was to say, converts who were receiving energy from Abraham as hairs emerged from the head should be pure of any dross and contamination. So she wanted to make sure that whoever was in their midst, in their surrounding home base, would be not just anybody. Right? So if you want to bring a more to home, she, in essence, having Yishmael and Yitzchak, which Abraham didn't see it as any problem. What's wrong in having Yishmael and Yitzchak in the same house? What's wrong with them, being together? Sarah didn't see that as a good agenda. Sarah felt he needed to, he's good, but they need to be separated. We need to have some kind of separation, right? Even though everything's good, everything will be good, and everything will work out. But you know what? Maybe it needs to be able to work it out. We need to have some kind of a differentiation. We need to have a separation. We need to have some kind of rules and regulations. Okay, so we need to have some kind of a concept, which that's what she did. Now, this was a great struggle for Abraham. If you understand Abraham, in his way of life, he married this woman. They loved each other, self-understood. But the Torah wants, in essence, tell us actually that it did affect him. It did change him. It ultimately did change Abraham. And that's why, because Sarah was greater than him. And that's why God says to him, whatever Sarah tells you, you shall do. Because even though you're self-understood, your agenda is unbelievable, and you're going to affect the world, no question about it, and you're going to transform the world, but now that we have the purpose of Isaac in the world, Sarah is correct. Now that we have the home base, then we need to listen to the words of Sarah. So we need to be able to have in the home some kind of structure and bring some kind of boundaries in the home and separation in the home, so that we'll be able to actually be a better voice to the world. So indeed, we find that there have been converts who were great tzaddikim. So that's actually, we call a convert the son and the daughter of Abraham and Sarah. Mm-hmm. And actually, I mentioned, I believe last week or a week ago, that it's brought down that the converts are from the unity of Abraham and Sarah. Even after they die, they come together. As you see, the Gemara says they're like alive, and they come together, and the converts are their souls that are created through Abraham and Sarah. But we see that great people. We see that throughout history that some great people were converts. Right? They were really extremely great. Rabbi Akiva was a great person. Greatest Tana, came from a convert. Onkelos, right? Onkelos, Shmaya Vaftalion, whatever. There's a list of great people that came from converts. Why? Because they come from Avraham and Yitzchak. They come. Sarah knew how to take Abraham's message and take away the bad and only have the good. And when through her capabilities, you have great people. You have great souls. So indeed, we find that the Tzemach Tzedek writes have been converts to great tzaddikim like Rabbi Akiva, Onkelos, a Meir, Shmaya Vaftal. A Meir was one of the greatest sages. A Meir, Allah. Remember Stam Mishnah Meir. When you see a Mishnah in the Mishnahs, it's a Meir. A Meir was a convert, and Avadia, who was a prophet. Certainly, they all derived the energy from Avraham Avinu. This was because Sarah removed the impurities from the hair of Avraham Avinu. And they should be clean of all dross. So in essence, that's why converts could be holier than regular Jews, because they come from Avram Avinu. Where does the neshama come from? The neshama is not coming from their biological parents. Right? The neshama is not coming from their biological parents. They're named Bas Avram and Sarah, the Bas or Ben, the son or the daughter of Abraham and Sarah. So they come straight from Avram and Sarah. I'm not called the son of Abraham. Right? I don't have that chus to be called the son of Abraham. I'm not. I'm the son of my father. His name is Chaim Meir. So that's who he is. So I come from Jewish parents. You take a convert who comes from non-Jewish parents, so he comes from Abraham. He really comes from Abraham and Sarah. So that's why they can be. That's why it says that the convert, the souls. That's why it's an extra mitzvah of a convert. That you have to love a convert because she's a Jew, and you have to love a convert because she's a convert. So you have to love her double, right? Because she's a Jew and she's a convert, or he's a Jew and he's a convert. It's a double love. You have to love him because he's a Jew. You have to love him because where does the neshama come from? Just think about where the neshama comes from. Neshama comes from a very high place, extremely high place. So that was to clean the dross and the spiritual and the light of lice should not be found in them. So the Rebbe says, now come back to the portion. So the Rebbe says, if you listen to the portion, it's the life of Sarah. Abraham learned the lesson from Sarah. Abraham learned the lesson from Sarah. Abraham, the first thing he does, he realizes, right? Oh, I can go to universal burial place, right? I'm the universal guy. Why am I suddenly now want to separate myself? I want to separate. I want to buy this place for me and my wife and for my children and my family. I want to separate myself. He learned the lesson, right? Number one, he learned the lesson. Chia Sara, he learned, now even though I'm the universal guy, let's just bury me anywhere. Bury me, and let me bury. No. I want private burial. Suddenly he changes his philosophy. You see the greatness of Abraham because he lived. Sorry. So Ma'am Chia Sara, text number 12. Amar Yisra Chia Sara. Why was it called Chia Sara? For the four couples of there, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah. So Abraham wants to separate himself from everybody else. And he wants to separate himself, and he wants to buy the property. He doesn't want anybody else buried there. Right? He doesn't want to have everybody, whoever wants to be buried next to me, gesundheit. No, I bought this property. And even if, right, and even though the children of Ches say take it, right, we'll give a gift, or even Ephron says take it. Oh, no. Abraham is not interested in taking it, right? He's not, I want to buy it. I don't want anybody later to say, it's not mine, it's not my family, not my child's, it's not my grandchild's, it's ours. It is ours. I don't want anybody else buried here. I want to be buried here. So that's the first lesson we see that he learned. Then the next lesson we see from the second story. Again, he learned the lesson, right? He wants a specific wife for his son, right? He wants a specific life for his son, for his family. And the Rashi says that Eliezer really wanted to give him his daughter. Right? Eliezer had a wonderful daughter. Eliezer was the right man, his right man. He went to war with him. He did everything, but he was his confidant. He even calls it the ruler of my house, Eliezer. Why wouldn't he want to give him? So look at Rashi says, a very powerful Rashi. In text number 13, it says, Bas, Eliezer had a daughter, and he was looking for a pretext. So Abram would turn to my daughter. She's beautiful. Right? But Eliezer rejects it. Abraham rejects it. And Abraham says a very sharp expression. He doesn't bring it down. But Abraham says in the Rashi, Abraham says, I'm blessed and you're the opposite of blessing. I don't want to be part of you.
Why did he say that?
Because he was a descendant of Canaan. And Canaan was cursed. So he said, I don't want to be part of you. Wow, Abraham, the universal guy, suddenly became very seclusive. very, very, very protective. He learned the lesson. So he listened. Chia Sara. The Rebbe says, "You're telling me that Sarah doesn't live on? Sarah does live on in the portion, because Sarah's lesson to Abraham lives on, and so we find it in the last story of the Torah before he dies. Vayitan, and Abraham gave all his possession to Isaac. Right? Here's the universal guy. He gives everything to Isaac. He has 6 other children, 7 other children. Right? Besides Shmuel, he has 8 kids, Kenai Nahara, right? He gives everything to Isaac. And he gives the other one, but he does the next step. And to the sons of Abraham, from Elias, what he had from Hagar, Abraham gives them gifts. And he sends them away. He sends them away. He follows again Sarah's direction. He sends them away. He sends them away from his son. He says, no, you're wonderful guys, but I need to protect the home. I need to live in the life of Sarah. I need to protect my home. You guys are wonderful. I'm going to give you wonderful gifts. I'm going to praise you guys. But move on. Move on. Abraham was still alive eastwards to the land of East. So Rabbi Shlomo Efrat, in the text number 14, there's Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim Loshitz. Lived in the 1500s, in the time of Arizal. And Abraham gave all his possession to Isaac. He withdrew his inheritance from the other children. For that was what Sarah wished, when she said, for the son of the maid will not inherit. So Abraham still lived. This is many years later. Abraham remembered what Sarah said. I don't want inheritance. You want to give them money, you want to give them gifts, but I don't want them to inherit you. It's important to me. Because later on they'll say, oh, Abraham, there was a couple of kids inherited from him. No, I don't want anybody to inherit you but Isaac. Because that will be the struggle. Later on people say, oh, Abraham had other sons, other children inherited him as children. No, I don't want that. I want that it should be clear that Isaac is your inheritance. Everybody else is your children, wonderful, give them gifts, reward them, make them rich. That's not my problem. You can give him more money than you give Isaac. That's not the point. I want that Isaac should inherit you. That's I want to make sure that the world and everybody knows that Isaac is the one who inherits you. Which is a struggle till today about that concept. But therefore, Abraham listens to Sarah. Even though his own philosophy would be, let everybody inherit me. I'm the father of nations. Like, what does it bother me? The more the merrier. The more the merrier people will inherit me. But he listened to Sarah. He listened. Listen, further, the Holy One, blessed to be, agreed with her and said, whatever Sarah tells you, hearken to her voice. For Isaac will be called in your seed. So therefore, you're to listen to Sarah. Your inheritance is Isaac, and you should follow Sarah's direction.
So, Rabbi?
Yeah. Can we finish this off and then we'll ask the question? We're almost done. Text number 15. The central point of Pashas Chia Sara, the Rebbe ends off on text number 15, page 66. The central points from Chia Sara, although its time frame is after her passing, were achieved by Sarah. So therefore, if you listen to the Pasha, the Rebbe says, Sarah is still alive. Because it's her influence that everything that happened in the portion. Through the work of 127 years of her life. However, as she actually went about her work, its impact remains concealed and only became revealed after her passing. Now, in so much as the ultimate purpose of one's life work is for the effects of the work to eventually be revealed. Therefore, it's understood that those aspects of the Pasha in which Sarah work becomes revealed after our Chia Sara, the life of Sarah, that completed the purpose of 127 years of physical life in this world. So ultimately, her real life was revealed. Because you don't see it in the other parshas. You just see whatever God says to do, you shall do. But we don't see what is the meaning of her life. Actually, we see it in the 3 stories that happens after her life. And that's where you see that she continues to live. And that's the beauty of the Parsha, yeah.
So my question is, what would happen if she wouldn't do that?
Right.
Like,
You-
we would probably disappear with the whole...
You're right, yeah. We would lose our identity and universal message.
Right.
Which ultimately is the purpose. Abraham is not totally wrong, because that's the ultimate purpose. Safa achas, the prophet says, when Mashiach comes, we'll all talk in one way, in one voice. So that's the ultimate. But to come to that, you need to first have an identity.
Right.
And that's the problem. We lose our identity. So Sarah wanted to have the Jewish identity. And if we have an identity, then we don't get lost. When you lose your identity, then you have assimilation, and you get lost in the nations. Even though we're all one big kumbaya, but it's not one big kumbaya, because you get lost in your identity.
Is shtetl really about maintaining separation?
Yeah. So the chachma is, when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America in 1940, he said, I came to prove America is not different. You can live in the big city, and you can still don't lose your identity. A Jew should never lose his identity. The problem in America, that's why they say in America in general, there's no identity. There's no identity. People don't have
People change their names to sound
people,
more Catholic.
whatever. People don't have an identity. They don't have an agenda. Yiddish guy Chia Sara comes to tell you need to have an agenda. Okay? And the truth is that she was greater than Avram Avinu, and that's why God tells him, even though Avram Avinu had a great agenda, trust me, he had a very powerful agenda, but it was a worldly agenda, and God and Sarah said, it's wonderful, I'm with you with the ride until Isaac. Now we need to make it a personal agenda. We need to have a personal agenda. And then we can have a universal agenda. And Abraham really shows the greatness of Abraham also, that Abraham accepted that even after her death. He accepted that. I mean, he changed. Abraham changed his way of life. He changed because he listened to his wife. He changed because he realized that she was right. And he changed his agenda. So even though he continued to spread God into the world, but when it came to Isaac, he made sure that first of all, Isaac will have a burial place, and his son will have a burial place, and there will be that burial place will always be there, and it'll be separate from everything, and it'll be divided from the rest of the world. And so too, that Isaac, when he's alive, Isaac would be identified as his inheritor, and that's important also. And who Isaac would marry was important to him, right? And say, okay, marry everybody, just marry somebody. We're universal. We love everybody. No. He wasn't like that. He said, I want you to marry a specific person, and I want this to be accomplished in a specific way. So you see that it changed. And I believe that the lesson is a two-way lesson. First, you should have an agenda in life, like Sarah. And you should be able to change the agenda to, if you have an agenda, it's not the most greatest agenda, even though it's good, but maybe you should change your agenda to a greater agenda. Maybe you should listen to the Sarah in your life, and whoever that Sarah is, and change that agenda, and maybe become a better agenda, a more refined agenda, a more better agenda. Yeah.
I was thinking, Sarah was like, how there's a couple of things.
Thank you very much. Those on Facebook, you can't hear the questions, so I wish you all a great day.